Welcome to session 2 of North America. And again, if you're bouncing over from Rob's presentation, you may not be in North America. That's okay, and that's perfect. It's just, it was easy for us to organize it that way. So welcome again to Exterro Inform. It is 9 a.m. Pacific, which puts us at noon Eastern, I believe. And so welcome. Today, I'm used to just general webinars, but this session we're joined by David Williams from Microsoft, and I will let him introduce himself in just a second. Standard operating procedure. If you were here for previous sessions, you guys know where the chat is, you know where the QA is, but it's over on the right side of the screen. I encourage you guys to use that, interact with David. We just super appreciate the fact that he's here. Just as a kind of like, as we go through this intro, maybe drop where you're from. Please don't put your address, although that'd be a good social experiment to see who did that. But like maybe if you're in the United States, what state you're from, what country. If you're not, it'd be interesting to see where you're from. But we also have QA. We'll be doing some polls. David has prepared for us. And David, as you introduce yourself, one question's already come through. Will a copy of this presentation be made available? I'll let you answer that. But sure. David, welcome, and take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to make the presentation available. It's the presentation is somewhat generalized to just try to keep us on track and make this conversational between myself and Justin, and happy for the audience to ask questions as well. I provided something similar to this at the Northwest ICAC conference, I guess last fall. So a little bit about myself. So as Justin said, my name is Dave Williams. I work at Microsoft. I'm in the worldwide public sector government organization. I lead the global public safety and justice strategy. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I don't actually come from the public safety background. I spent 24 years in the military, in the Army, did several things, infantry, a little time in the communications field. It's funny that I ended up in tech because that was probably the least favorite time I had in the military when it came to all the technical pieces of it. And then my last 8 years or so, I spent in the special operations civil affairs community, which is super interesting space to be in. Enjoy that very much. And then spent a decade teaching software, advising, selling, and bringing some new capabilities to market in some smaller organizations. And really that was consulting, if you will, around analytics and investigations, which really got me more and more aligned to policing and the public safety and justice space. So that's a little bit about me. I'm currently based in North Carolina, so I'm not out in the Pacific Northwest where we're headquartered at, but in North Carolina, just outside of what was previously known as Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty. But I'm happy to take you guys through this. I think it's a super interesting topic. I think that there are some real challenges around this space. I think there are some challenges that we will constantly be chasing to try to catch up to and figure out the best way to continue to defeat, detect, deter deep fakes when they're involved in the criminal space. I also think that there are some challenges that are just going to be super difficult that also have great societal impacts, and happy to talk about some of those. So a little bit of an agenda, going to cover kind of understanding deep fakes, what the current state of detection and authentication is, how to protect yourselves, and then a little bit about where the future is going. So understanding deep fakes. Before I dive into that, could you jump up the first poll, please? Sorry, I hit the trigger a little quick.
Yeah.
And I can't see the poll, Justin, so you'll have to tell me when it kind of starts to hit some numbers. We'll give it a minute or so.
Yep. Okay. Remind me which one, because it looks like Sam was whatever. It's yeah, there it goes. There it goes. Pops up. So what do you think are the most common uses of deepfakes? entertainment purposes could be both good and bad, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. I guess that
Yeah,
depends on what your flavor of entertainment is.
yeah, yeah.
Are we able to see answers kind of come in
Yeah.
real time?
So we got what's coming in so far is entertainment and media is 35%, political manipulation 26%, cybercrime 32%, and educational purposes are down at 6%. So looks like most people think cybercrime and entertainment and media is neck and neck. So
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And please continue to add to the poll. I'll go back and look at them. I'm really interested to see what others think and what they're seeing in their business. So definition and types of deep fakes, right? So what are they? They're synthetic, right? They're of likenesses, sometimes misleading, usually very realistic, and they're getting more and more realistic as time goes by and as these models increase in capability. Sometimes I'm shocked about how authentic things look. Because I think if we rewound 6 months, a year, most people would say, let me show you two things and tell me which ones you think are fake, especially if they were video, and people would say, oh yeah, that's absolutely fake, and they're pretty good at it. I think that's getting less and less so, that now deep fakes are a little harder to detect, especially if they're curated by somebody who just takes the time, and it's not something that I would create. Video deep fakes, obviously manipulating video footage, not only manipulate video footage, but also generating video footage. You think of Sora and the other AI models that are coming out. Usually those are real short form, just because of the cost associated with them. But you can do a full length movie, and you can use real actors and real actors' voices and their ability to move seamlessly on the screen and to match voice and mouth movements and all that together, which is it's scary. Last November, I approved the use of my likeness and voice. I basically recorded myself saying 22 different sentences to try to get the AI to understand the way I spoke and sure I was enunciating properly and that it could understand me. And then also I stood in front of a camera without moving, and then stood in front of a camera moving my arms and my mouth, and like I was talking to an audience. And they took those likenesses and they put them together, and during an industry event in Australia, they had my likeness play the role of a artificial intelligence police commissioner, and the audience was able to ask questions verbally, and I would provide audio answers back, and the audio answers were backed by a GPT. I think they were using like GPT-4 to basically put together and curate those answers and provide them back. Now, it was pretty easy to tell it was fake because there was these hesitations and the movements are a little strange. But we've come a long way, and it's really scary when you start thinking about using synthetic voice, and how that turns into audio deep fakes, and how that can be used for scams. Everything from scams against elderly people or people that are just vulnerable because maybe they're not paying attention, and somebody calls and says, this is who I am, and it sounds like somebody and you believe them, and then they lead you to do something that ends up draining your bank account or causing you to do something for them that could get you in trouble. And then of course image deep fakes, which are probably the best, just because they're static. They can be manipulated. They get all the shadows often right. These pictures of these dogs and cats are cute and kind of dressed, but I've seen people that dress their animals like that, and it's pretty hard to tell if any of these are fake, and they're all fake, right?
Hey,
Just
David,
understand what that looks like. Yes, sir. Please jump in.
can you it looks like your slides switched to a different monitor. Can you on like your
Really?
presentation just I think you're sharing your slide deck, but or you're sharing your PowerPoint, but not the actual deck. Yeah.
So what are you
I
seeing
can
now?
I'm seeing the pets now, but if you when you share it kicks it off to another screen. So
I'm only on one screen, so I don't know why it's doing that.
okay. hit share again and let's see what happens.
So you're saying when I do this?
Yeah, I still see PowerPoint. It's not actually sharing. So maybe change the share to your full screen or something, or I don't know.
Oops.
But while you're doing that, just on your topic of emulating voices and whatever, we actually had, and you can. It's kind of a hard Google because I come from a small place in Eastern Washington, but we had a business owner get a phone call in the middle of the night and it sounded like his mom. And she was like, "Hey, somebody's broken into my house and I'm being held hostage basically. And they want you to pay this amount of money to this account or something." But he said, if you call the cops, they'll kill me or whatever. Well, the really scary part there, I can see full slide now.
Right.
The really scary part for this guy, he's a business owner, is his mom lived in the basement of his house. So he thought somebody had broken into his home. So he called the police. They broke in with the SWAT team while his mom was asleep and had the SWAT team bust in through the door to rescue her. But it was because he owns a business and his mom had owned the business before. She had advertisements and, like you said, these very short audio clips to duplicate her voice. And fortunately, he didn't send any money, but you can imagine the wake up call of a SWAT team busting through your door. Not pleasant. And so just a real example of how that can happen anywhere. Cause like I said, I'm not from a big place or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, like, I guess it was probably 15 or 20 years ago at this point, my grandmother called me and said, "Hey, I just wanted to check. Are you okay?" And I was like, What are you talking about? I was in the military. I don't even remember where I was stationed at the time. And she had received a call from somebody saying that they were in jail and they needed some money to get bailed out. And apparently the person was convincing that they were me. And thank goodness that she was on top of it and thought, well, maybe I should call back and verify. Fast forward to today, where people can capture a little bit of your voice and duplicate it. That becomes really scary, because then it's hard to understand that might not be real, and where people can spoof phones and phone numbers and things like that. So deep fakes are really scary in that space.
Tommy put a comment in the thing, and I know you can't see it, so I'll read it. He says, "Great current example is the woman that recently got scammed out of 800,000, thinking she was communicating with Brad Pitt." And it sounds funny, but my grandmother before she passed was on Facebook, and this was pre deep fake, or at least when it was really whatever. But she swore up and down that she was following Richard Gere's Facebook page, and we're like, well, I mean, I don't know if he actually has a face, but she was like, no, this is his Facebook page. So these people can get invested in their celebrities, and like Tommy said, get really, really hosed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go and try to find, Musk's pages, right? There's a whole bunch of them. Now, I don't know whether he's got 6 or 8 that he created or what, but it's hard to keep up with which ones are real, right? And which ones are fake. A little bit behind the technology behind deep fakes. These are called GANs, or generative adversarial networks. And I'm not a deep technical expert, but essentially the way this has been explained to me is these two networks, they kind of work off of each other, trying to find where there's unrealistic things in it until they come up with something that's very hard to detect, one network against the other. So then it's like two people arguing about something until they get to a thing that they say, yep, we agree that this one's good, and then forward it goes, right? So understanding how it's used, putting it behind paywalls, or figuring out ways to tag things inside the metadata, to understand that they're being generated by AI is important. I know that Microsoft does that now. Anything that you develop image-wise through ours, there's a watermark that's hidden in it that says this was created by AI. I think that's one of the areas that we're going to see as we kind of get through this, is legitimate sources that are being used to generate images for marketing or anything. These PowerPoints are completely generated by AI, right? I just typed in a bunch of information, said this is what I'm looking for, gave it some data to be grounded in, and said go create my PowerPoint presentation for me, and it presented them. So these are all generated by AI. They're going to be properly tagged. It's the illegitimate uses that aren't going to be, and the sophisticated criminal out there will know that, and they will use systems that aren't ethical, and they're not following best practices and good rules, and so they'll be hard. So maybe the lack of watermarks or the lack of tags showing that it's AI generated will be probably one of the indicators. Now, how do you see that? How do you know these are AI generated? That's going to require some technology to be available for people to be able to quickly understand if something's been generated by AI or not, because not everyone's going to have some kind of system to run it against, certainly not with images and video. So origins of these, they emerged in the 2010s based on media manipulation, record something real and make changes, through something like Photoshop, but a video capability for that, and then put it back out there. I know that my time in the military, we saw this a lot in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places where the adversaries were trying. They cared less about the truth and more about being first to get to the media to share whatever it is that they wanted to drive the narrative. And so they would do that. They would stage things, they would manipulate video, and then they'd put it out. And we all know that once something's out there, if you're first, it's really hard to get ahead of the curve of whether or not people believe that's true. We see it in the U.S. around political campaigns and manipulations. When news agencies try to go fast and they get there first, and you'll often see, we haven't verified this, but we're going to report on it. Well, that some people just ignore that statement, and it just becomes real to them. And with deep fakes, that becomes one of those challenges. Is once it's out there, even if you're able to disprove it, how do you really reel it in? And then how do you undo the harms that may have already been created? Whether that's harm to children, teenagers being undressed, even though it's not really them, and then that being shared across social media, people being scammed out of money, banks being scammed where people are using fake liveness to defeat liveness detection, and some of these different types of systems that help to detect deep fakes. And Justin, did you have any thoughts around that, kind of the evolution history that you were thinking of?
I just made a note of it. It's kind of not a direct answer to your just question, but I just really found your comment that the desire to be first has overcome the desire to be accurate, or the need to be accurate. That stuck out to me. Literally just wrote it down, and it's interesting in that space. To answer your question directly, the interesting thing that I've talked to a couple people and been researching this, is probably most of us have because it's hitting us, is the evolution of it is been interesting, because to your point, even now you can kind of tell, but back in the day we didn't really take it seriously, because even the deep fakes were like, well, that's obviously, it's a deep fake. But it's now grown so fast. Have you seen that Will Smith image from 2023 versus the in just the speed that we're doing it right now, even with your little avatar that you did at that conference, it was like, oh, I can tell. But I wonder if they did it next year or even later this year, if we could tell, and the speed at which these things are happening, I think is the crazy part, the scary. It's outrunning, like you said, the tagging, it's outrunning the policy, it's outrunning all of that stuff. I don't know. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, it really goes down to this, the kind of the last bit on that last sentence there that talks about it being an arms race, and it will be. And I think one of the big challenges in the public safety space is the procurement methods that we have around getting new technology and making it available, and how governments can buy technology doesn't match the speed in which adversaries can do that, right? Or commercial organizations for that matter. If a bank feels like they're really threatened and there's something out there that'll stop that threat, the bank can usually just go buy it. And of course, they need to make sure it's secure and all that, but they can implement it pretty quickly. Governments, you think about in the CSAM space, one, they're under-resourced, they're overtasked, and their procurement rules don't really support the speed and the evolution to keep up with this kind of continuous arms race. So I don't know how we're going to get there, but we're going to have to figure out a way to get there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of go on. And I think now's the spot that I would like to, we're going to talk a little bit about deepfake detection and authentication and how we determine what's real and what's not. So maybe the second poll would be a good time for that, please.
Thanks, Sam. David, while people are answering this poll question, we let some results come in. We had some comments that I think you could address. So I'll just read all three of them because they're all tied together. So it says, any tool out in the world that has the ability to examine a photo to determine if real or fake. I would imagine that metadata might be a good place to start. And then somebody responded saying EXIF data or looking at the ASCII values in a hex viewer. And then somebody said, what about EXIF tools? Isn't it a good use to bring up either the metadata as real or fake? So what thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and we'll address that, but I'll talk about it a little bit now why people are answering the poll. It's going to have to be multi-layer, right? So there's companies out there that they focus solely on the metadata, making sure that there's been no manipulation, telling you the lens and the type of device that was used, the camera, all of those things. And then people that aren't smart enough to turn off things like their geolocation, seeing those kind of tags and that metadata, I think are crucial to being able to understand real or fake, which is great for the people that are probably asking those questions are digital forensics experts. And I imagine much of our audience is in that space, which is great for you. But how do you determine that for the average consumer of information or the kid that gets shared with them over some social media site, a nude of one of their classmates? There's really no way for them to understand that, right? So I think that's where we're going to have those challenges, is figuring out how do we do it fast enough. But yes, absolutely, the metadata, all those hex values and hashing and all that, I think are super important in authentication, as well as biometrics. And the two of them together are more powerful than the two of them individually, because there are people that can manipulate or keep from being manipulated the values that are in the metadata. Or manipulate them, and you probably can expose that through the right tools. And I know that when I was doing this session at Northwest ICAC, I had two pictures of myself, and they were both real pictures. But I used a biometrics tool to try to tell me, based on a percentage of likeliness, were they real or were they fake? And the original picture, just as I took it, shared once into the system and ran through it, said it was 80% likely that this was a real person and a real photo. Exact same photo with nothing more than cropping it just slightly and saving it, running it back through, said it was 35. It was 80% that it was, or 75% that it was fake, right? So that's one of those things where, well, biometrics, yes, it said that this was fake, basically saying that this was a slightly manipulated photo, but the photo hadn't been manipulated other than to be cropped out of a bigger photo and saved. So I don't know how we get past some of those challenges, but I do think that it really has to be this multi-layered authentication. And we're just talking about images. What about video? What about audio? What about audio in real time, where for a long time, the kind of state of the art for bank authentication has been voice ID running in the background. So how do you start to understand all of that? So Justin, maybe you could tell me a little bit about what the poll says.
Yep, let's take a look here. So again, which method do you believe is most effective in detecting deepfakes? 20% said manual analysis by experts. 27% said AI and machine learning algorithms. 32% said watermarking and digital signatures. and 22% said public awareness and reporting. So just to go back, the watermarking and digital signatures was number one, but all of them kind of, it was pretty evenly split across all four options. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So I would, so state of the art of detection really is it's machine learning, right? Advances in that, better visual analysis, AI detection tools, right? Because AI, when we start thinking about the speed and the overwhelming amount of data that's out there, I think AI starts to play a real part in that, being able to, at least if it can't definitively say 100% real or 100% fake, especially when you start talking about things that are combined where you're just using face swapping technology or using these websites out there that will remove the clothing of a person and try to keep everything in line with what the person's body shape and everything looks like. I think it's important to have AI tools to at least put them in buckets that flag things that then you need to take a deeper dive. You need to go look at the metadata, really start understanding that, and then being able to detect that manipulation, just inconsistencies where things have been changed or manipulated. And that's when you're manipulating the original photo versus completely generating it from scratch, which is a different kind of problem. And it always strikes me with the CSAM investigators out there in the world and the ICACs and like type organizations, the NCMEC, for God's sakes, what was it, 35 million cyber tips last year or the year before, and it's just a continuous growing problem. So you take all the mandatory reporting and the cyber tips and you add on that completely fake imagery generated out of thin air, whether that's video or just images, and you pile that on top of a problem that says, I got 5 people to investigate it, I got 10,000 cyber tips, I don't know where to start, and now I have a huge influx. I think those kind of tools are going to be super important in helping to triage, to figure out where do we start, right? And I think we could all probably agree that the best place to start is save people that are in harm's way, that are real people. Not that we don't need to have stronger laws and prosecute people that are generating and sharing fakes as well. But if you're overwhelmed, you don't want to go chasing the red herring. You want to go chase the thing that's real and that you can have an impact. Justin, you want to comment on that at all?
Only in that I agree. Like I'm not saying that AI generated, like you said, CSAM or those types of things are not a problem, but prioritize the real victim, or the real life victim. That's in the deluge of problem content, that should be our target. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a challenge technologically. I already hit on this a little bit in the previous kind of commentary there. And then I think that probably one of the biggest things that we're going to have to figure out globally as a global community, and then within our various countries where we have different rules um, around privacy and that kind of thing, we're going to have to get to a place where we have absolutely immutable, authenticatable identification of people. And we're already seeing it. I remember going to the UK a couple of years ago, landed at London Heathrow, and I was all the way through and out into, looking for an Uber within like 20 minutes. Because they had, I think it's Idemia was the system that they were using. And I just walked by and it scanned my face, truck person, my passport's known, authenticate, and away I go. And I'm seeing that more and more starting to be used in the US. I think it freaks some people out to know that, it's like your handprint and, biometrics and things get you through. But we're going to have that, and we're going to have multi-layer, or we're going to continue to have problems where people are impacted by losses in the financial services place, where people are getting their money stolen or they're being scammed out of things, if we don't have this multi-layer authentication and immutable ID. I've had a couple of, I don't even remember what the tech was, but I've had a couple of organizations that I deal with that basically said, hey, to improve authentication, you opt into voice verification. And so knowing that I had a PIN to put in and opt into voice verification, and some of them even two-factor authentication, through an app. I'm sure everyone on this call has heard, or if you haven't heard, you should go look it up, that with the um, breach of several of the telecom providers having PINs, even ones that expire in 10 seconds, sent through text message, is currently compromised. So if you're doing two-factor authentication through text verification, you may or may not be opening yourself up to somebody being able to get into the middle of that and manipulate the system that you're trying to verify to, or verify on your behalf.
David, it seems like right now we call it multi-factor authentication, of course, because it's not just two necessarily, but it's almost like something something you have, and now it'll be something you are. So it'll be like a PIN, your phone, and then facial or biometric, and then you need all three of those. So it almost, from what I took out of what you said, know, have, and are will be the kind of the future of multi-factor.
That's brilliant. I love the way you put that, and I agree wholeheartedly. It really will be something that is hard to spoof, right, or to manipulate. I was talking to somebody the other day. I got to think about how they put this. So it was a company that does, this trusted verification process, and they were talking about like biometrics, and they were using some sort of a light flashing color pattern that's hidden within the video stream, so that somebody couldn't record the video stream. Like, you couldn't use your own recording to come back in and verify yourself a second time, because it would know that pattern had already been used. So it was another layer being inserted into the biometrics and the streaming with liveness. Because I said, you're using liveness detection. They said, yeah. I said, well, we've already proven, or not we, but it's been proven that you can record somebody's face and movement and you can defeat liveness detection. And they said, yeah. So we're using this color light changing pattern that's unique, basically like a light hash in there, to make sure that it's not being reused. And I was like, oh, well, so that's some of that multiple layer verification.
Have you seen that
go
security
ahead.
company that does the lava lamps, the wall of lava lamps?
I have not.
So everyone should Google that. It's a security company similar to what David just said. And they literally videotape this huge wall of lava lamps, and the little bubbles are never the same across these 200, 500 lava lamps. And that's how they build their cryptographic signature it's like constantly changing, constantly unique and organic. Anyway, okay, sorry, David, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, that's cool. I'm not going to Google it though. I'm going to Bing it, just because I'm a Microsoft guy, right?
Yeah, sorry about yeah. Bing it.
Just kidding. I'm going to Bing it. Yeah, we got to get that to be a verb. The legal and ethical considerations, touched on it really early on. I think we're going to get to a place where very legitimate sources, when they put them out there, there's going to be a way, and I think it's going to become more and more accessible to everybody to be able to verify the authenticity of something, or the fact that it was generated by AI. The ones that don't have that are going to be the ones that are suspect when we're talking about manipulation. But again, back to this race to be first, I think there's got to be some responsibility on the parts of people that are providing information, whether that's the media or others, to not just state this is unverified, but maybe slow down a little bit, or be a little more deliberate about sharing things that they're saying, hey, we're just trying to get information out there. Please don't take this, and we'll follow up. And it always strikes me sometimes when they get it wrong, right? So you think about a newspaper, they'll splash something above the fold front page. Dave Williams is this horrible monster. Here he is, he did all these bad things. And they did that without being able to verify, and they, didn't have the validity of the information. And then when they go to retract it, they retract it below the fold on page 14, or the digital equivalent of that. So I think that media services and other providers of information are going to have to be more deliberate about one, making sure that they have verified or clearly state that this could or could not be true. And then when they find out, they need to come back and say, hey, based on additional research or additional time, we have verified that this is absolutely correct. Or you're going to have to come back and in the same level of effort say, we got it wrong. Otherwise, the impact to people's reputations and companies' reputations and organizations is just some of it's irreversible. You just can't get everybody back. Once they see it, they believe it, and that's that. Can we put up the last poll?
Yes, it just went up, and people are answering, so we'll give that a second. One of the things I wanted to ask about, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but there's things that are coming out like that are policies or ideas that are like C2PA, where it's kind of this standardized tagging practice. And what made me think of it is you said, and I made a note of it, there needs to be some responsibility on the media. And I use that as the wholesale, on the creation of that content. How do you see that growing, or those types of things, as far as helping to regulate this content? And I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it makes sense. I know Microsoft is one of the founding members of the C2PA, the consortium on that, and I think that's a key, right, for those that have systems that generate content. And we're seeing more and more people joining that and saying, yes, we got to have standards and it needs to be tagged. I think that is huge on the regulation side, but again, only on those that subscribe to that kind of process. So I don't know, like, how do you start to get past that? Do you do you create laws that say, if you are a generative AI organization and you don't subscribe to C2PA or some similar international standard of tagging for anything that's created on your stuff, and you can make sure that it's not easily removed or can't be removed, they take you down, they prevent you from being used, which is probably great in the US and Europe and places that want to sign up to that. But where we have nation state actors that are very interested in destabilizing or disrupting politically countries and areas and processes, how do we get past them? Do we just automatically assume then that anything is not watermarked or not tagged is nefarious? So I think that's where we're at in that process, is how do we get there, and how do we prevent those who don't subscribe to those policies from being able to use it, except through international law and agreements.
Yeah, which is a slow process.
Absolutely. And not everyone's on the same sheet of music.
Yeah. Yeah. So here is the poll results. So what strategy do you think is most effective in preventing the misuse of deepfakes? So stricter laws and regulations. People were not a fan of that, David, with 5% voting for that one. And by not a fan, they must not think it'll work. Advanced detection technologies, 55% voted for that. And then public education and awareness came in at number 2, most voted at 24%. And then collaboration between tech companies and law enforcement at 16%. So overwhelmingly on the advanced detection technologies was where people fell.
That's great. Really interesting to hear kind of the split on that, right? So enhancing security, obviously, right? Better forms of verification. We talked about that. What are the 3 things you said? Something that you are, something that you have, and something that you know.
Yeah.
So how do we incorporate that in to make sure things are real? How do you do forms of verification for that? And I think that it really does become this layered approach that you. I know, like, when I want to buy something, I want to log into something. Not only do I have to use my face or fingerprint and a code, but I usually have to use both. So I use Authenticator for as many things as I can, as many organizations that subscribe to it, where I can scan the QR code and put it in my Authenticator app. I think that's going to take it. It's interesting that people are like not a fan of more laws and more rules. I I agree in that I don't think that that is how you stop the misuse, but I do think that there's a cooling effect on the people that are maybe less determined to use it improperly. if if there are laws that are enforced and there are consequences that somebody can see and say, hmm, I was getting ready to, I'll use teenagers as an example. I was getting ready to take this picture of my girlfriend I broke up with and go to this website and remove her clothes and share it on Snapchat. And if I was able to see in the news and was educated on the fact that that was a crime and that I would be arrested and I could go to jail for it, I think that those kinds of naive users that don't realize, one, the harms necessarily, don't think about the consequences. If we don't have the laws in place, then we won't be able to mitigate that at all. Um, but yes, I think I agree with the kind of the way it folded out on using advanced detection techniques, especially understanding what I believe our audience makeup to be. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, two comments came in. Criminals don't follow the laws and regulations. So answering your direct question, how do we mitigate? Okay, they're like, ah. And then, yes, I assume people will ignore the laws, but like the watermark as a standard for verified use. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I really do. I don't know. I mean, I remember being a teenager, and one, I probably didn't really know the law, and if I knew it was wrong, did I care if it was something that I wanted to do? Uh, I don't know. It's a challenge, and I think a lot of it is just educating people, and educating parents, and having parents, monitor and educate their children and stuff. And just, I mean, the whole long, drawn out conversation about social media and the risks and harms and proper use. And then when you add in generative AI and deep fakes, it really becomes a problem.
yeah, one last comment just came in on
Sure,
that. Laws and
please.
regulations act as a deterrent and are often way behind the times in legislating technology. So,
100%. Yeah, good Lord, how far behind the times. I mean, well, I won't even try to describe the story because I can't remember the details of it. But um, I was reading some law. Oh, I know what it was. I was at the Digital Crimes Unit at Microsoft doing a tour with a partner, and they were talking about the law that they were using on taking down, like, sinkholing um, websites and stuff that were being used, and using legal methods to take these things down, where they were attacking networks and things. And the law is a law out of the 1800s that talks about cattle being on other people's property and your ability to do things about that. So they have taken a law from the 1800s and they've applied it, and they've gotten the courts to approve the use of that law applied to technology, which is crazy. Why is it that we can't get laws updated? Why are we why are we applying a law that was for cattle crossing fences, to do sinkholing of cybercrime? It's beyond me. But you're right; they move very, very slow. Um, Tamper-proof media. So how do you make sure things can't be tampered with? Can't be screen recorded. I know I'm seeing more and more where you'll go to take a screenshot of something and it'll just be black. You can't screenshot it. Of course, those things have a cost associated with them. And then uh, chain authentication, right? That's that multiple checkpoints. I know I talked to um, one of the voice authentication providers that was doing a lot of it for banks. And I was saying, well, it seems like with deepfakes, you get past that. And they said, well, actually, there's like 8 layers. So 8 different gates that something goes through, kind of all behind the scenes, to allow a transaction to take place when you call in to do something with your bank. And they said it's pretty hard to defeat all 8 of them. Of course, not all banks are doing that. Not everybody's following the same standard, but I do think this chained authentication method is where we're headed. And of course, with all of the digital forensics folks out there, being able to look at multiple places, one from a visual inspection 2 to watermarking, and then 3 looking at the hash values and looking at all the metadata behind it to really start to understand what's real and what's not real. And then, God bless all of you for being able to go into courts as those experts and figure out how to take the complexity of all that we've talked about in the last 45 minutes or so, 50 minutes, and explain that to 12 people from all walks of life in a way that they understand it.
Hey, David, just real quick. I know
Yes.
I kind of threw a wrench in it with that sound issue that was on my end, but we got about 5 minutes left. Just letting you know.
5 minutes, great. No problem. I'll get us there. So, combating deep fakes, liveness detection. Again, that can be exploited, right? It has been exploited and defeated. So you got to do that. So you think about liveness detection with a voice authentication and image, and I think that Justin really nailed it with something something you have, etc. Geofencing, where you're at to be able to authenticate. I think those kind of things are becoming more and more important, even with cloud services and people saying, well, how do I know nobody else is getting in my data? Well, you could put a geofence around locations where you have to be inside a certain area before you could even log in, even if you had the right system and the right credentials. So future directions and innovations, blockchain. It's something that's out there. I mean, they use it for crypto, immutable. I'm not an expert on blockchain technology, but I'm wondering maybe there's some in the audience that spend a lot of time in this around crypto analysis and those kind of things. And could we do things more with blockchain applied so that when you upload images and stuff, you're able to trace the authenticity of them and make sure they're not manipulated. Advanced machine learning, I think we've all hit on that, and I know it's come up early on. And then just the integrity, and I think that really has to do with putting aids in so that you know what's trustable and what's not, to include like watermarking. And then I think this is super important, this collaboration, right, between tech companies and law enforcement. And you think about like photo DNA just being made available and put out there, and it's been updated recently to be faster and more performant. But it comes down to matching up our needs in society, revenue generation, because businesses are in the business of making money. But part of that being able to make money is also making sure that you're trusted and secure. And so how do we start to bring that together to make advanced capabilities available at the right speed, through, you think like software as a service or managed services or just API calls, and keep the cost down so that the technology can keep up with the arms race against adversaries that are using these things willy-nilly and unencumbered by any rules or procurement law, in a way that helps to combat all that and addressing the misuse of it. And I really do think that there needs to be a collaboration there. Yeah, we just got to do it, right? I talk to law enforcement agencies every day as a part of my business, and I talk to them about better procurement methods, agile methodology, figuring out how to do things faster, cheaper, fail early, and iterate through it, much in the way that agile development methodologies follow. That's not always easy for them to wrap their heads around or how to do it. But if we don't get there, as one guy said at a conference I was at, we're chasing Ferraris with horses, and you're never going to catch them, right? So we've got to figure out how to adapt that, and we've got to do it collectively. It can't be us just saying, well, go find more money, us being the tech companies. We got to figure out a way to make it available and make it available to all, because I don't care if you have 4 sworn officers or 4,000, you probably have a lot of the same challenges, and you don't have the same budgets or capabilities or specializations. Yeah, enhance AI, more user education, and those regulatory frameworks. I think we've covered all that, Justin. We're 1 minute to go, and I don't want to be over. And if there's any other questions, comments, happy to take them. I'm easy to reach, dwilliams@microsoft.com. Find me on LinkedIn or send me an email. I'm happy to collaborate on this, and I'd love to learn from you all and what you're seeing in your everyday lives and your jobs.
No,
Thanks,
fantastic
Justin.
presentation, David. Thank you. Like David said, we're at time, or just about. So if you jumped in this session and you weren't here a little earlier, I will share a quick screen for you. I got too many browser windows open, so I'm hunting right now. There we go. So we had Rob Fried a little bit ago. Now we just listened to David Williams and What is Real, which I thought was going to be him divulging that the Matrix was held on Microsoft servers, and we don't know. But maybe next time, Dave. It's in Azure. The Matrix is held in Azure, and we're all living there. Next, we have a dual presentation with Angie and Bree. So on maximizing value while driving efficiency. So when I'm going to signal Sam to close this down here in a second, you guys will be migrated just like that. You guys have about 5 minutes, 4.5, and for drinks and a bio break, and we'll see you over there. David, thanks again, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I hope it was good information. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.